China has just signed the internal combustion engine vehicle's death warrant, while Toyota has decided to double down on ICE. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. I'm going to go through a couple of articles and X posts, and then I'm going to give my thoughts about this. We're going to start with what I think is kind of a bombshell announcement from China. And this was from a few days ago. The problem is I've just been so busy with a backlog of videos, I haven't been able to get to this one yet, but I've been saving this up. Anyway, China moves new energy vehicle target forward to 45% of auto sales by 2027. Electric cars gain ground faster than expected in world's largest market. So of course I will leave a link to this article and all the other things in the description, but I'm just going to read little parts of it here. The first part is that previous to this new announcement, the government had set in 2020 a goal of 50% by 2035 with intermediate targets of 20% by 2025 and 40% by 2030. And yet, as you see in the paragraph above, new energy vehicles, including electric vehicles, plug-in hybrids, and fuel cell vehicles, accounted for 32% of sales in 2023. So they had already jumped well past the intermediate goal of 20% by 2025. So clearly, the Chinese consumer is already well on the road towards purchasing new energy vehicles. I would personally rather cut out hybrids because that really isn't a new energy vehicle. It's just a gas engine with a big battery in it. So anyway, but that's not split out. But whatever it is, you can see that the trend is very, very strong in China towards going towards new energy vehicles, and very particularly battery electric vehicles specifically. But anyway, with that in mind, China has now rolled things back from 2030 40% new energy vehicles to 2027 45%. So they've really pushed things forward, not only in terms of time, but also in terms of the percent of vehicles that will be new energy vehicles by 2027. And as the article says, this sets a more ambitious target in light of the faster than expected spread of electric models. And I'm going to get back to why this is important in just a second, but first I want to talk about the contrast here. So there is China setting things and moving towards the future. In the meantime, from gearmusk.com, we get Toyota doubles down on internal combustion engine vehicles with new gas engine, preserving smells and feel for gearheads, ? I think that's rather amusing. So again, link to this entire article is in the description, but I'm just going to read the first two paragraphs. While most automakers accelerate their transition to EVs, Toyota is taking a contrarian approach by developing a new internal combustion engine vehicle. The goal, according to CEO Akio Toyoda, is preserving elements that, quote, dyed-in-the-wool car fans crave, end quote, like engine smells and sounds. And yeah, I don't crave that stuff. Yes, you read that correctly. Toyota's CEO wants to maintain nostalgic smells associated with gas vehicles. This odd justification comes as Toyota confirmed rumors of a new ICE project within Toyota. And if this smells of desperation, then I think you are on the right track here. I think Toyota, and Toyota both see the writing on the wall, and they know things are going south very, very quickly for their company, and they're just throwing out potential excuses or things like that to try to, I don't know, whistling past the graveyard in the dark or something like that. They're just attempting to pretend like there is not a problem here and everything is going to be fine. So without a doubt, Toyota is in a world of hurt. Do you hate how dumb your phone's keyboard is? Yeah, me too. That's why I was thrilled to find out about Type AI. Type AI is a ChatGPT-based keyboard solution that takes your iPhone keyboard from dumb to genius level. And it's super simple to use. Simply download Type AI to your phone and add it as a keyboard that will work across all of your apps. On my iPhone, I simply press the globe button to bring up the Type AI keyboard and I'm ready to go. How does Type AI work? It's powered by the ChatGPT API. So it's got all the smarts ChatGPT is famous for, and since it's a keyboard extension, it works seamlessly across any platform and any app. Plus, it's super fast and you get great results in seconds. And Type AI is so much more than autocorrect. It can check spelling and grammar, and it can also suggest ways of improving the tone of an email or even help to write the messages you're sending to a friend or colleague. Amazingly, it can even translate text or emails from you right from your keyboard. Type AI means you have ChatGPT right at your fingertips anytime. As you can see, it's super easy to use. Just click the little green speech bubble and choose from any of the options, and when you see the output, simply press the apply button to make the changes right in your document. Be sure to click the link in the description below for a free trial of Type AI Premium version and find out what a game changer this is. Type AI is making my phone keyboard a joy to use rather than a pain. Thanks. Elevate your typing with Type AI by clicking my link below to get your free trial. Thanks to Type AI for sponsoring today's video, and now let's get back to it. And while we're at it, I wasn't originally going to include this in this video, but I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to talk about the US market for just a minute here. In the US, plug-in electric vehicles, which again includes plug-in hybrids, so were 9.1% of all light-duty vehicles sales in 2023, up from 6.8% in 2022. So this is a pretty big deal. You can see the light green bars here are 2022 sales, and the dark green bars are 2023. So every single month it was outsold, and the percentage is really close to, 9.8% in December is very close to Tony Seba's mythical 10%, where we go from the beginning of the S-curve and the early adopters to the very rapid launch and takeoff of the S-curve, where it goes basically linear and the adoption is very rapid. That's already happened in China. We're seeing like a very, very high percentage of vehicles sold in China already are electric vehicles of some variety. And in the United States, we're lagging behind by a while. And in Europe, they're lagging behind by somewhat. Europe is in between China and the US. But all three of these most major car markets are now just about to 10% or well past 10%. And as Cyber Gigafactory here says, the 10% Tony Seba told us is not far. The S-curve is starting to steepen. And hey, if you mention Tony Seba, the GOAT comes out and he responds to you. So that's pretty cool. Just as predicted, this is when adoption of the new accelerates. This is also when we see market trauma. And this is important, swift and disproportional impact on incumbent profits. To which Equilibrium replied, the key here is disproportional. Legacy ICE doesn't just lose one for one when somebody buys an EV instead. In other words, if I buy a Tesla, that means that somebody else is losing a sale of a Camry or some other vehicle. Instead, as Equilibrium notes here, as their ICE volume decreases, their supply chain collapses. Guaranteed orders decrease, price for parts increase. It's going to get very ugly very fast, and I believe it probably already is starting. They're just not telling us yet. And just one more reply here from Tony Seba. He replied to Equilibrium's post because it has autocalypse in it, which is the new best word ever. Anyway, he says, that's exactly right. Soon we're going to experience an autocalypse. And of course, that is automotive apocalypse. And what does Tony mean by this? I mean, I guess I should not put words in his mouth, but my assumption here is he is saying that the internal combustion engine vehicle market is going to collapse a lot faster than people are giving credence for. And part of this goes back to the original article that I was talking about, which is China moving its new energy vehicle target forward to 2027 from 2030 and increasing the amount to 45% from 40%. And again, just to make a note of this, in 2023, not 2027, last year, new energy vehicles accounted for 32% of sales already in 2023. So we're still looking at 4 more years to get to 45%. I have a feeling that China will be relatively close to 45% in 2024 sales. So we might be looking at 40% next year and then 45 or 50% in 2025 or so. So I think they're going to blow past that 45% mark well before 2027. All right, so now let's circle back to what I said in the cold open, which was that we were looking at China signing the death warrant of internal combustion engine vehicles. What do I mean by that? I mean that they have pulled their demand to get to 45% of new electric vehicles. That does include hybrids, but if you look at statistics, hybrid market share is actually collapsing right now, and fully electric vehicles, battery electric vehicles, are taking up the slack for that. But anyway, they've pulled their targets back from 2030 to 2027 and increased the needed percentage that is sold into the market from 40% to 45%. And what that means is that the largest market in the world, the largest auto market in the world, I think it's around 23 million vehicles per year, which is around 9 or 10 million units more than are sold in the United States every year. So we're talking about the largest market, not just by a little bit, but by a lot. And that market is being pressured. Remember, we're talking about not a democratic government where people can, give the middle finger to everybody and do whatever they want. We're talking about a very authoritarian government, and what they say goes. And currently in China, if you want to buy an internal combustion engine vehicle, it's actually a little bit remarkable to me that still 70% of vehicles sold right now are internal combustion engine vehicles. Part of that must come down to just the fact of price, and people are very, very price pressured, because if you buy an ICE car in China right now, you have to enter a lottery just to get a registration to be able to drive that vehicle. So it could cost you a lot of of money, like I think up to something like $10,000 to get a registration for an internal combustion engine vehicle. Now, if that happened in a European country or in the United States, there would be riots in the streets and everything like that, right? But again, because you have this authoritarian government, they're able to dictate exactly what happens, and the public does what they do. And so what we're talking about here is not just a government saying, we wish you would go ahead and convert over to electric vehicles. They're saying you will convert to electric vehicles, and they're making it happen very, very quickly. And of course, just as importantly, the United States is very much behind, and Europe, like I said, is in between. But the US, even at the US, they're getting really, really close to that magic 10% mark. And when you get there, just as Tony Seba said in his posts, that's when things really, he's been saying this for 10 plus years, a long time. But anyway, I'm just saying recently in his post, he's been saying that when you get to that 10% mark, you're in the steep part of the S curve and things really start to take off. And the inverse also happens because every time an electric vehicle is sold, that means that one vehicle that was internal combustion engine vehicle is not sold, but that has a bigger effect than a one-to-one effect. And this is where we get into that death warrant being signed. Like I was saying, what happens is every internal combustion engine vehicle that is not sold. So if you go from 80 million approximately that were sold in like 2017 globally, right? Those were pretty much all internal combustion engine vehicles. If you start knocking that down to 75 million, and the pandemic did a pretty good job of this, by the way, already, but you start knocking it down to 75, then 70, then 65, then 60, et cetera, et cetera. Every time you start knocking off a bunch of these vehicles, it's not just that you're losing that vehicle sale. It also means that all of the very delicate web of supply and demand and all of that stuff that is a car gets disrupted. And if you think about it, an automobile is an aggregate of hundreds and hundreds of parts, maybe thousands of parts in an internal combustion engine vehicle. Those parts are generally made by people all over the place. Some of them are made at the main auto factory, but most of them are made externally and they're shipped to the factory by smaller suppliers. Those smaller suppliers depend on certain numbers of orders. They're like, we need to have an order for 1 million of these parts per year, whether it's a head gasket or whatever that kind of thing is, or a seat, or you name it, whatever that part is, they need a certain number of those particular parts being ordered per year to be able to deliver it at a certain price. So if it is something like a gasket and they're charging 50 cents per unit, I'm just making up these numbers, but whatever, they charge that kind of thing because they know they're going to get 1 million of those per year. That's the number of orders. But then suddenly it's cut in half and it's only 500,000 per year. They're going to jack the price of these things. They can't keep the price of this unit, this widget, whatever it is, this gasket or whatever it is, they can't keep that the same as they had before because they have to manufacture a certain amount in order to maintain profitability and stay in business as a business. And so what that means is that the millions of electric vehicles that have been sold into the market in the past year or two, those vehicles are taking away from this web, this supply. Instead of supply chain, I think supply web is a better way to think about it. And think about how delicate a web is. I know webs are pretty strong, right? Spiders they weave amazing stuff. But what I'm saying is, as a person, you could take one of those and you can pull it and you can break it. And if you break one of the strands of the web, it's okay. The spider can go fix it and stuff. But you start going through there and tearing out a bunch of the strands, which is effectively putting all these little supply companies under pressure, all the way down to chemicals and stuff, right? Mining things, all of that stuff, all the way up to manufacturing specific parts and integrating them into these vehicles. All of that stuff is very delicate, and the pricing is very much dependent on how many of these units, how much stuff is being supplied. And once you push these suppliers by not ordering as many units as they were expecting, they're going to have to raise the prices on you in order to remain profitable, or else they go out of business. So there's two choices as an auto integrator, the Fords, GMs, Toyotas of the world. They have the choice of either paying more to these companies to supply the same parts, which means that their vehicle effectively, if you think about the thousands of parts and every part costs a little bit more money, that means that their vehicle is going to cost substantially more money. So that's option one. Option two is they're like, nope, they play hardball and they're like, we're not going to pay you anymore because we want it for the same price we've always had it for. And the supplier goes like, well, we're belly up, we're out of business, we can't supply you anymore because we can't make a profit selling it at this point if we're only making 500,000 and we expect it to make 1 million. And that conundrum for the auto integrators like Ford, GM, Toyota, etc., is exactly what Tony Seba is talking about when he talks about the autocalypse. He's talking about the fact that this supply web, this delicate supply supply web that is built on 100 years plus of supply demand in all of the back end stuff and exact pricing and all of these things, and stuff just arriving just in time to build these vehicles, all of that kind of thing is going to fall apart. We saw it come really close to falling apart already in 2020 and 2021 when the global pandemic caused all of these supply shortages, and it really stressed out the whole system. And it's still probably not fully recovered. And now right on top of that, we're going to add this collapse of internal combustion engine sales. And this means that internal combustion engine vehicles are going to disappear much more quickly than people think. A lot of people I've talked to, and just, both professionally and just casually or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, ICE vehicles are going to be around forever because people love ICE vehicles and blah, 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 blah. But what they're thinking about is being able to go out and buy a Camry for, say, starting price of $25,000 or $30,000 or something. That's what they're thinking about. They're like, okay, that's the internal combustion engine vehicle. It will always remain that price and it will never change. But what I'm saying, and what Tony Seba backs me up about, is that's not going to be the case. If you want to buy an internal combustion engine vehicle in the future, in the next couple of years, the price is going to start to rise as you see less and less economies of scale in that market. And so what'll happen is eventually, let's just say the Tesla Model 3 stays at around $35,000 entry price. So it's just there, right? The Toyota Camry, let's say it starts at $25,000. What you're going to see is that the Camry is going to be $27,000, then $29,000, then $32,000, then $37,000. So eventually what's going to happen is all of these internal combustion engine vehicles, they're going to cost more money than an electric vehicle is, a battery electric vehicle, because battery electric vehicles are in a virtuous cycle. They're in the opposite cycle, which is that the supply chain is becoming more robust. There are more orders. People can supply things for cheaper. All of that kind of stuff is going on in a very positive way for the electric vehicle market, while it's exactly happening in the backwards order for internal combustion engine vehicles. So that means that eventually a Camry, which is demonstrably worse than a Model 3, I mean, I've driven in both of them. The Camry is a pretty boring car, but it's functional, etc. But the big advantage it has is it's relatively cheap. And so you can purchase one of those for relatively less money. But if it goes up, and I'm just using it as an example car, pick whatever you want, a Fiat 500, anything like that. But pick a car, the internal combustion engine vehicle equivalent of that car is going to eventually be more money than the EV version of that vehicle, whether we're talking about a luxury model, mid-range model, eventual lower range models, etc. All of the ICE vehicles are going to go up in price quite steeply, while the EVs are actually not just going to stay still, they're going to go down, which is going to create a huge delta between internal combustion engine vehicles and EVs. It's the opposite, right? When this all started like 10 years ago, a Model S was a very expensive car, and an internal combustion engine vehicle, there was a big delta this way. We're going to flip that on its head. And what happens when you flip it on its head and people are suddenly going like, wait, I've got an internal combustion engine vehicle and I want to buy it, but it costs 20% more than an EV that is the same or better and requires less maintenance, and I don't have to fill it up with very expensive fuel. And by the way, gas is going to get more expensive too. All of that stuff is going to happen because, again, economies of scale. If you don't have to drill as much oil out of the ground, that means you don't have economies of scale in drilling and in searching for new sources of oil and in refining and all of that kind of stuff. So those prices are going to rise as well. So everything is going to drive the market towards adoption of electric vehicles over the continued use of internal combustion engine vehicles. And it's going to happen quickly. That's the thing. I think people think this is going to be a steady state for a long time, and it's not, because we're going to see EVs continue to come down in price somewhat, while we're going to see internal combustion engine vehicles go up in price very, very rapidly. So just pay attention. We're going to see a pretty significant rise in the price of internal combustion engine vehicles in the next 2 to 3 years, and that's going to change the equation entirely. So China, by pulling their demand back from 2030 to 2027 and the market share from 40% to 45%, is really signing internal combustion engine vehicles death warrant, because no one can survive without producing in the Chinese market, because it's the biggest. And quite frankly, consumers are already well past these markers anyway. They're actually blowing past even what China has demanded. So the consumer market in its own right, even in laggard United States, is 10% this year, and probably next year it'll be 12% plus, or maybe 15%. So it's going to move up quickly as well. But the most important market, honestly, is China, and China is setting the trend. And the fact that Chinese consumers are no longer purchasing internal combustion engine vehicles in the numbers that they used to means that these companies are not going to be able to produce ICE cars at the prices that they have and stay profitable. So they're either going to go out of business or they're going to have to raise the prices of these vehicles. And when they raise the prices of these vehicles, you get an inverted, delta, and you're going to say, like, why would I purchase a more expensive internal combustion engine vehicle that costs more to fill up and it costs more to maintain than a really, really nice EV? And so more people will buy EVs and the cycle will continue and it will go really, really rapidly. So pay attention to this space. I don't think it's even going to take till 2030 before we see a complete collapse of ICE vehicles. I predict by the end of 2024 at the earliest and by the end of 2025 at the latest that we are going to see this gigantic delta start to happen. We're going to see the ICE vehicle market collapse completely, and we're going to see a very rapid acceleration of the demand for electric vehicles over internal combustion engine vehicles. So all these companies that think they have 10 years plus to play around with before they have to convert to electric vehicles are probably already aware of this right now, but in the next couple of years, it's going to go from inside the boardroom to becoming very, very public, and these companies are going to be hurting. I would say especially pay attention to Mazda, which has gone all in on gas engines, and it's a very small company. I love Mazda. I really have always enjoyed their cars, but I think they might be the proverbial canary in the coal mine. You might see them go bankrupt very, very quickly. So let me know in the comments what you think, and a big thanks to Type AI for sponsoring today's video. Be sure to check out my link in the description to get a free trial of Type AI Premium and find out what a game changer it is. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one.